Peter Laviolette gets hit in the head with a puck at practice. The competition is on at training camp, and the Rangers sign a pair of veteran free agents. All this and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 904 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the Rangers. We're doing a special, Sunday edition here to basically just kind of put a bow on the first couple of days of training camp here. The Rangers were back in action on Friday and Saturday. We're going to talk about those two sessions in today's episode. Also going to be talking about a couple of free agents, veteran free agents to be exact, that the Rangers have picked up since the last time that we talked. And, I figure we might as well go ahead and start with Friday's training camp session, maybe mix in a little bit of Thursday as well. But the Rangers didn't really do a whole lot on Thursday. It was just basically a bunch of drills. Not really a whole lot of substance there, but obviously good to hit the ground running. It sounds like the Rangers did exactly that. Most of the beat writers were there. We're talking about, on Twitter and also in some of the articles that they wrote, just the pace of play and practice and just a sense of urgency being very high. The fact that there was very little downtime between drills, and it felt like the Rangers, at least going by, again, what I read, what I saw on social media, just making the most out of every single minute that they were out there. So that's obviously great to see. And look, it's training camp. I get that. They haven't even played a game yet, not even a preseason game yet, but it sounds like thus far, things are off to a good start. Again, going by these articles, going by some of the things that the players have had to say after the practices. So yeah, let's go ahead, dive right into Friday's training camp session here. The Rangers had three different groups A, B, and C. Every group had between 10 and 12 forwards, 6 to 8 defensemen, and exactly 2 goalies. Every group was out there for about 2 hours and 15 minutes apiece. And Group A, they were out there first. It's basically just about the exact same team that you would expect to be out there on opening night, with a couple of exceptions. They had 12 forwards in that group, and it seems to be the 12 that have certainly the inside track to be out there on opening night. You also had the 5 defensemen, who we know for sure are all going to be out there on opening night. And then in addition to that, you also had the 3 defensemen that it seems like these are the 3 guys battling for that last spot there. Gustafsson, Jones, and Harper. Harper probably a dark horse at best to get that 6th defenseman spot on opening night, but he was out there in Group A. And, of course, Igor and Quick were the 2 goalies. The other 2 groups were basically a mix of prospects and guys that, you kind of expect to start the season with the Hartford Wolfpack. But, obviously it was good to see all the Rangers out there in one facet or another. One other thing to note here, because I know somebody on social media was asking me about Gabe Perreault and, him possibly being at training camp. Only one member of this year's draft class, by my count, is at training camp this year. That would be Dylan Rubrick. He was in Group C on Friday. The Rangers took him in the 6th round at number 178 overall. Nobody else from this year's draft class participating. One thing that happened on Friday that certainly was of note is Peter Laviolette was actually hit in the head by a puck. This happened during Group B's session. So, the Rangers, the star players are already out of there, and the guys that you expect to see on opening night were all out of there. Potentially serious situation. You never want to hear that anybody gets hit in the head or the face with a puck, but Laviolette's a tough guy. He played in the NHL as well. Sounds like the trainer helped him off the ice, but he returned very shortly after that. And I'm going to go by 2 separate tweets that were sent out by Arthur Staple, who does a great job covering the Rangers. These two tweets, a bit of a tongue twister there. 2 tweets were sent only 7 minutes apart. The first one noting that Laviolette was hit in the head by a puck, was helped off the ice. Then the second tweet was 7 minutes later. He was already back out there. So it sounds like he was no worse for the wear. And I saw Colin Stevenson tweet out something. Laviolette walked by him. He asked if, he's all right. And Laviolette just said all good. So, nothing to worry about there. There was a picture on social media that I saw of Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick. The 2 of them were obviously spending some time together at practice, talking a little bit. Seems like they're getting to know each other a little bit. And it's an interesting dynamic because Jonathan Quick, you've got this 3-time Stanley Cup champion, this slam dunk Hall of Famer, Vezina winner, multiple All-Star games, pretty much has done everything you can do as a goalie in this sport. And I was also reading another article from Vince Mercogliano where Igor was interviewed, and he said, I was too hard on myself last year. And I would tend to agree with that. There were a lot of times where Igor, if he had a bad game, he would really kind of almost like pile on himself after the game. And he said, the goalie was bleep. I think you guys can figure out what the bleep is there. And I would always prefer that. I would prefer somebody who cares too much and is too hard on themselves versus somebody who is just kind of laissez-faire, doesn't seem to really care that much at all. But there's got to be a happy medium. Igor Shesterkin, I feel like this past season, and he had a fantastic season, by the way, take nothing away, but he did go through some stretches here and there, particularly early in the season where he wasn't really himself. And I almost get the feeling this might literally be the first time that this guy has ever really struggled at hockey. We've talked about, his video game numbers in the AHL, the KHL, just been a dominant goalie at every step of his journey through his hockey career thus far. And obviously, a couple of rough games this past season, but to kind of let Igor elaborate here, I'll read another quote that he had. I was too hard on myself. You remember how I was every practice. I was so mad and I didn't want to talk much to everybody except my family. I was so mad at myself because I didn't play how I wanted. I hope this season I won't be as angry. I will be more happy and enjoy talking with you guys. And this kind of, to bring everything back to what I initially started talking about there, Igor and Quick, spending some time with each other on the ice. My hope is that Jonathan Quick can kind of be a big brother to Igor Shesterkin. Not that he's like in desperate need of a mentor or like, his game's going to fall apart if he doesn't have a veteran goalie in the room with him. But you can't tell me that somebody with the resume of Jonathan Quick doesn't have something good to offer, some good advice to offer, somebody like Igor Shesterkin, who really is still just getting started in his career. I believe Igor now 26 or 27 and, just a handful of seasons into his career. And Jonathan Quick, like we said, he's done just about everything. He's had his ups and downs too, far more ups and downs. But again, somebody who has been around this league for a long time and I think can maybe help Igor a little bit with the mental side of the game. We'll keep our fingers crossed that that ends up being the case. Again, he's not in desperate need of somebody like this, but Jonathan Quick, having somebody like that in your locker room, particularly if you're Igor Shesterkin, in my very humble opinion, that can only help. Blake Wheeler was also interviewed after Friday's session, and this is what he had to say about joining the Rangers. It doesn't feel weird. It feels like I've been here a long time. Feels a lot longer than just a month. I feel at home. And that's obviously great to hear. I don't know if Wheeler has a ton of history with other players on the Rangers other than Jacob Trouba. Obviously, the two of them were together in Winnipeg, and that's when, Trouba was just getting started in the league, and Blake Wheeler was the captain of that team. But I feel like Blake Wheeler, this is somebody who's going to benefit from a change of scenery. And I have no doubt, he has a lot of great memories playing for the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, he had a lot of fantastic seasons there. They had one or two, decent playoff runs. I know they made the Western Conference final at least once when he was there. So they weren't too far away from potentially going to the finals at least one time. But he was the captain there. We've heard reports about how, there was a little bit of a divided locker room, maybe not the most, tight-knit bunch of players in the Winnipeg locker room as we see around the league, certainly in the Ranger locker room. And I just feel like there's a lot less on his plate now. This past year, he was stripped of the captaincy going into the season. Now he comes over to the Rangers. They've already got this tight-knit bunch here. He just has to fit in. And, he doesn't have to shoulder the burden of trying to, repair the locker room or be the captain of this team or anything like that. So I think that's going to bode well for Blake Wheeler. I think this is somebody that, again, whether he came to the Rangers or not, whether he went anywhere else in the NHL, somebody that I think could certainly benefit from a change of scenery. And we'll see if that ends up being the case here with the New York Rangers. Laviolette had some interesting quotes after Friday. He was talking a little bit about hockey analytics, and this is what he had to say about it. I want analytics to give me information that I can use to help me make my team better. Inside of that, I don't think that you can just get completely hung up on numbers. I do think there's a feel to the game. There's my eyes and my knowledge of a person or a player. And yeah, I think, some of those new school analytics, there's certainly room for that stuff and they have their place, but we do see in sports sometimes across, a couple of different sports where I do think there's times where certain teams get a little bit paralyzed by analytics. So it's good to know that Laviolette is open to them, but he's also got to trust his eyes and trust his instincts. That's the kind of stuff that I think you like to hear going into a new season. We also, in our most recent episode, went through Friday's line combinations and defense pairings. So if you want my thoughts on those combos and those pairings, you can go and check out the most recent episode. The only thing I'll say right now about that, though, is obviously they're wanting to try different things in training camp and the 6 preseason games, and I think that's obviously a good thing. And Peter Laviolette stayed true to his word. The Rangers on Saturday went out there for practice, and the line combinations look quite a bit different. And we're going to talk in greater detail about those in just a little bit of time here. Besides that, yeah, I mean, again, Friday's practice session sounded very up tempo. The pace was very high. They were playing with some speed. They were doing some work off the rush. And as I mentioned earlier, sounds like little to no time between drills. Just making good use of every second that you're out there on the ice. Jimmy Vesey scored a couple goals off the rush. Got some stick taps the second time that he was able to do so. Jacob Trouba had a pretty goal off of the rush as well. There was a video of this posted on Twitter. Little backhand, forehand roofer for Jacob Trouba. I believe they were skating 3 aside at that point. But yeah, Trouba, up the center of the ice, receives a pass, and again goes forehand, backhand, and roofs it. That got some oohs and ahs, I think, from his teammates there. So that was great to see as well. Yet assistant coach Dan Muse, he was working with the Panarin, Hedl, and Wheeler line, and sounds like the Rangers did a lot of conditioning drills as well. Peter Laviolette teams, they're going to work hard. You got to believe that conditioning is going to be a point of emphasis as well, and it sounds like it was on Friday. So in just a second here, want to go ahead, turn our attention to Saturday's session, including the new line combinations and some other talking points as well. We will get to that in just a second, but first, we got to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Jase. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics from Jase Medical by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, we just want to go ahead. Thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. I mean, hey, you've been with me all summer, right? Into the fall here a little bit as well. And we are right on the brink of New York Ranger hockey. It is the preseason, of course, but that doesn't really make it any less exciting as far as I'm concerned. We're going to see a lot of these new New York Rangers with their new team for the first time. There's guys out there competing for roster spots and competing for, a place in the power play, a place in the top 6, a place in the top 4, whatever it might be. There's a lot of storylines going into the preseason here. And the Rangers start on Sunday with a 5 p.m. tilt on the road against the Boston Bruins. But for right now, I want to go ahead, turn our attention to Saturday's session from training camp. And we might as well go ahead and start with the line combinations. They were quite a bit different on Saturday as opposed to what we saw on Friday. So the top line, left to right, you've got Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, and Blake Wheeler. This is the second day in a row that Panarin and Wheeler are playing on the same line. But this time they're on the top line with Mika Zibanejad as opposed to being on the second line with Hedl as they were on Friday. This line is interesting for sure. We've had this debate for quite some time about whether or not the Rangers should go with Panarin and Zibanejad on the same line and basically just overload the top line, just completely stack it and say, okay, this is the line that we go to when we need offense and when we need a goal. It's certainly an option. I'm more open to it now than I was, when we started Locked On Rangers. When this podcast started, the Rangers were still firmly in the middle of their rebuild, and they just didn't have any depth at all. I mean, if you go back and you look at some of those lineups from certain nights in those seasons, you'd be pretty amazed. I think the one year, the third line center was Brett Howden, and the fourth line center was Elias Anderson. So that's kind of where things were. I do think this is a deeper team now, certainly than it was then. And the fact that they're deeper, I think that affords you the luxury, if you want to take it, of putting Panarin and Mika on the same line. Back then, when the Rangers were rebuilding, putting all the pieces together, they were ridiculously young. I always liked the idea of Panarin and Mika on separate lines because you spread the wealth a little bit, and you've got now 4 different forwards who can play with either Mika or Panarin and get a little bit of a boost from doing so. Panarin and Mika at the time, far and away the best 2 Ranger forwards on the team. They still are the best 2 Ranger forwards, in my opinion, but they got some help now. So it'll be interesting to see, if they end up rolling that way. And as far as Blake Wheeler being with them, again, I don't dislike it at all. I just feel like there is a little bit of redundancy between Panarin and Wheeler. I wouldn't mind seeing them on different lines, but again, it's training camp, it's preseason, and this is the time to experiment and see what works and what does not. Second line, left to right, you've got Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, Kaapo Kakko. So Trocheck and Kakko, after both being left out of the top 6 on Friday, both moved together into the top 6 on Saturday. The 2 of them were on the third line Friday. Now they're on the second line on Saturday, and they are out there with Chris Kreider. Kreider and Trocheck, I noticed this more so in the second half of the season than the first. Those 2 started to find it a little bit. They started to have some chemistry together. They scored a couple of really nice goals together off the rush. Sometimes I think, you have a new teammate. It takes a little while to kind of get a feel for, okay, what's this guy all about and where's he going to be and all that good stuff. But yeah, I mean, the 2 of them together, I think certainly that could work. I'm still, for the most part, assuming that Panarin ends up back on the second line. I like the idea of Trocheck staying with him. You could go with Hedl there, but I don't want to be conceding faceoffs left and right with Filip Hedl out there with Artemi Panarin. My very humble opinion there. And of course, Hedl could always get better at faceoffs. I don't think he's ever going to lead the league in success rate, but hopefully he can improve there at least a little bit. Michael Pekka was actually one of the Ranger assistant coaches. He was out there working with some guys on some face-off things. So that was nice to see as well. But as far as the third line from Saturday's session, left to right, you've got Jimmy Vesey, Filip Hedl, and Alexis Lafreniere. Now, Lafreniere, this is going to be one of the bigger talking points in training camp in the early days here, certainly before any games are played. But one of the biggest things that we learned right off the bat is that Laviolette is looking to go with Alexis Lafreniere at the right wing. You would think the main reason for that is he wants to get him into the top 6. And obviously, with Kreider and Panarin both playing left wing, it's tough to do that if you leave Lafreniere on the left wing. But this is interesting to me because, and again, they said they're going to experiment. They said they're going to mess with some things. So I'm not panicking or reading too much into it. But this is interesting to me because you have a line here. It's the third line. It's Vesey, Hedl, and Lafreniere. So you very easily here could put Lafreniere at his natural position of left wing and put Jimmy Vesey on the right wing. Vesey is more than capable of playing either wing. And in fact, he played quite a bit more right wing for the Rangers last year than left wing. So it'd be easy enough to put Lafreniere on the left wing, but I don't think they want to do it because I think they're very, very serious about Alexis Lafreniere potentially opening up this upcoming season as a right winger. And that being the case, they want to give him as much run there as possible. That's my takeaway from this. Again, we're only 2, real practices into the season here. But when I saw that definitely intrigued me that, okay, Lafreniere's on the third line, but they're leaving him on the right wing in a situation where you could easily put him at left wing, put Vesey at right wing. They're doing that, in my mind, to get Lafreniere as used to playing right wing as possible and probably getting him primed to play in the top 6 while playing right wing. And then you've got the fourth line, left to right, Goodrow, Bonino, Pitlick. I talked about this in the last episode, but Bonino and Pitlick, I think you could pretty much pencil them in there. To me, the 3 guys in this lineup, as far as forwards are concerned, that are not going to move are Mika Zibanejad. We got another coach. This is going to be the 3rd coach in a row where Mika's the top line center and he never moves. People come and go on his left, on his right. They move around, but Mika's always there. To me, this is probably also going to be true of Bonino and Pitlick. You're looking at the Ranger 4th line center and the Ranger 4th line right winger, respectively, in those 2 players. I just can't see them playing in the top 9. Now, look, it's possible. I mean, maybe Pitlick is playing well in a certain game and the Rangers are sleepwalking and Laviolette decides to reward him with some more ice time and a more prominent spot in the lineup, just to throw out a hypothetical there. But to me, those guys are pretty much penciled in for the 4th line. And Goodrow, as we've said many times, you can move this guy all over the lineup. I think, again, it'll come down to either him or Vesey on the 4th line, and whichever one of them is not there, they'll be on the 3rd line. In this case, Goodrow on the 4th line, Vesey on the 3rd line. But yeah, that's a hardworking, grinded out 4th line there. Goodrow, Bonino, and Pitlick. So that's nice to see as well. The defense pairings, they went back to kind of their default setting, so to speak. Lindgren was back with Fox. Miller was back with Trouba. In the first session on Friday, Miller was with Fox. Lindgren was with Trouba. And again, it's time to experiment. It's time to mess with these things. I still favor a little bit, I think, Lindgren and Fox, and then Miller and Trouba. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in training camp. We'll see what happens in the preseason as well. And if nothing else, even if you go with those pairings, it's good to still mix it up a little bit here in the preseason because you don't want it to happen like in the middle of a playoff series where there's an injury and now, Fox has to play with Miller for the first time all season. So it's good to, obviously use this time to your advantage. And it seems like the Rangers are doing that. And then the third pairing was Zac Jones and Braden Schneider. And then you had a fourth pairing, quote unquote, of Erik Gustafsson and Ben Harpur. And this is different from Friday as well. We saw Gustafsson was out there with Schneider on Friday, and that was a third pairing. Now Zac Jones is getting his chance at it. And again, to me, this feels like the one true bona fide position battle. It's Jones versus Gustafsson with maybe Ben Harpur being a little bit of a dark horse there as well. You got to figure one of them is going to be out there on opening night. And one of them won't be. Somebody on YouTube, I think it was YouTube, threw out the idea to me of Zac Jones potentially being traded before opening night. I wouldn't rule that out. But I think the Rangers want to get another look at him. He's had some mixed results when he's been up with the Rangers, had a really good season with the Wolfpack this past season. And it's going to be interesting to see the two of them, him and Gustafsson, battle it out for that sixth and final defenseman spot. I also want to read a couple of quotes from Trouba and Fox because the two of them kind of weighed in on what the Rangers are doing with the blue line right now. So here's something from Trouba. Sometimes it's good to change things up and be aware of other guys. You kind of get stuck in habits one way when you play with someone for so long. And I think there's some truth there. That's something that I've every once in a while, I'll mention that on the podcast, that there's almost times where maybe you can get a little bit too comfortable with the guy you're playing with, as strange as that sounds. And maybe you're just not on your toes the way that you would be. But the big thing to me, again, it's the preseason, it's training camp. Let's take advantage of this time that we have here and make sure all these defensemen are playing are comfortable playing with pretty much every other defenseman on the team. This is the time to make that happen. And this is what Adam Fox had to say about it. There's a great sense of comfort when I'm with Lindy. I think you can see it on the ice. We really read off each other, and I think it's important to have chemistry. You look at forward lines, D lines, you've got to be able to know where the other person is. But again, that's what camp is for. Me and K'Andre Miller, know each other pretty well too, but you have to get those reps in to know where a guy wants to be and get that communication down. And to just kind of elaborate there, something from Peter Laviolette. There are no set lines I'm looking for. I'm looking to see inside of games if there's chemistry. I'm looking to see if somebody steps up and steps forward. There's opportunity for everybody. And I love that message. If you want a certain role on this team, go out and earn it. Go out and take it. I do like that. I can certainly appreciate that kind of mindset coming from Peter Laviolette. I can remember him saying things like that to the Flyers back when they did the Road to the Winter Classic miniseries when it was Rangers and Flyers that one year. So it's good to know that there's always opportunity and there's always a chance for somebody to kind of improve their standing, get better ice time, et cetera, et cetera. And then Alexis Lafreniere, again, this is going to be one of the bigger talking points the entire training camp. But he was talking about right wing, and I found this interesting. He said that the most difficult part of moving from left wing to right wing is actually coming back on defense. And I can see that a little bit. You're used to being on the other side. And, when you're on offense, when you're in the attacking zone, you kind of just go to work. But obviously defensively, you're reacting to what your opponent is doing. So I can see that maybe being a little bit awkward when you're on your off wing as opposed to, where you're most comfortable and where you've played the most hockey. But obviously, Lafreniere's got some time between now and the start of the season to get used to that. And hopefully that is exactly what happens. There was one other thing I want to talk about here too, because I mentioned this earlier. So Friday, Wheeler was on the second line. Kakko was on the third line. And we had Kakko out there with Goodrow and Trocheck. But here's something that Peter Laviolette said about that situation. And I think he's actually talking about that Kakko, Goodrow, and Trocheck line. This is what Laviolette had to say. I've had lines that have had specific defensive responsibilities. I think that they become valuable. If you can find a line like that, they can get you out of your defensive zone against other teams' top lines. I think that's a benefit to your team. And yeah, there are teams I think that they do benefit from having that really sound, stout defensive line. A lot of times it can be a team's fourth line, and I think the Rangers they can possibly do that as well with Bonino and Pitlick, and then either VZ or Goodrow, whoever ends up there. But Kako, it's easy to forget this. Everybody's looking for more offense and more points and everything. Kako's defensive metrics are fantastic, and we already know that Vincent Trocheck is a really good two-way forward, really good defensive forward. He can obviously win you a face-off when you need it. And Barclay Goodrow, just a hard-nosed player, and that's kind of his calling card, is being a good defensive forward. So maybe that's a line that gets some consideration going forward. And look, we got a lot of time between now and the start of the regular season. Eventually, I'm going to do an episode probably after the last preseason game where I say, okay, these are my line combinations, these are my defense pairings, and let's see what the Rangers do. After obviously they're going to watch my episode and hear what I say and then adjust accordingly. No, but I'll be very curious to see, once I lay out my line combos and defense pairings, what the Rangers end up doing right after that. So yeah, Saturday, that's pretty much it. One other important note that Peter Laviolette made is that the players who do not play in Sunday's preseason game against the Bruins, they will instead have a morning scrimmage in New York. So that's interesting to hear. And again, it just goes back to what we were talking about, not wasting any time this training camp, this preseason, making the most of every single day. I'm not sure. I don't think the Rangers have, announced who is going to be out there on Sunday night against the Boston Bruins. But I do remember watching one of the clips from one of Laviolette's pressers, and he mentioned that, Mika Zibanejad, I think he said Mika's not going to be playing in this first one. He was just talking about defensive schemes and whatnot, but he was using Mika as an example. And I'm pretty sure he said Mika's not going to be there on Sunday. So that's one player that I think we can rule out, but I'm sure he'll be out there for, the Rangers home preseason opener. Just a second, I want to go ahead, shift our attention to a couple of minor signings that the Rangers made, a couple of veteran pickups in free agency here. That would be defenseman Adam Clendening and goalie Brad Arvanitis. I'm going to say Arvanitis, something along those lines. I do apologize. If we ever hear Sam Rosen say his name, then I'll know for sure what to go with. But we're going to do all that good stuff in just a second. First, though, got to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much, much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off your NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, so figure we can wrap up today's episode here by talking about a couple of recent small transactions that the Rangers have made. Once again, they signed defenseman Adam Clendening. He gets a PTO, as does Brad Arvanitis. He is a goalie. We'll start with Arvanitis. He is signed to a PTO. That's a struggle for me. I'm definitely going to have to work on that one. But he's signed to a PTO. He's 26 years old, 6'2", 194 pounds. He played for 3 different ECHL teams this past year. And for anybody who needs a refresher, ECHL is one level below the AHL. So you're basically 2 steps away from the NHL in a roundabout way. But played for 3 different ECHL teams. Spent most of his time, though, with the Pensacola Ice Flyers of the SPHL. Played 20 games there. Had a record of 9-6-2, goals against average of .271, and a .919 save percentage. And again, this to me just seems like a move for organizational depth. I don't think that they have any grand plans for him, but we'll see. I don't think Igor Shesterkin has anything to worry about. I'll put it that way. But yeah, minor pickup for the New York Rangers. Another minor pickup for the Rangers, Adam Clendening, 30-year-old journeyman defenseman. He signs a professional tryout with the Rangers, a PTO. We saw this with Jimmy Vesey this past year. He ends up making the Rangers opening night roster. We also saw it with Ben Harper. Harper had a PTO at the Wolfpack and made that team, and then obviously contributed to the Rangers as well. So the last 2 PTOs, they've become a part of this New York Ranger team. We'll see if Clendenin can pull it off as well. And if this name's a little bit familiar with you, it's because he actually is a former Ranger. He's really bounced around the league quite a bit, despite only playing 90 career NHL games at the age of 30. He started his career in 2014, 2015 with the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks drafted him number 36 overall in the second round in 2011. And again, despite all of this, he has now played for 7 different NHL teams. And once again, only 90 games. So 7 teams, 90 games. That's pretty wild to think about. He's averaging about, 12 or 13 games per team. But in order, he's played for the Blackhawks, the Canucks, Penguins, Oilers, Rangers, Coyotes, and most recently, the Columbus Blue Jackets. His last appearance in an NHL game was 2018-2019 with the Blue Jackets. He only played 4 games with them that season and also 7 playoff games. And he's been in the AHL ever since. So kind of just a journeyman NHL, AHL swingman type at this point. I would imagine that's probably where he'll end up being with the New York Rangers. We'll see how that shakes out. Might as well shine a little bit of a light on what he did his one season that he played here with the Rangers, though. So he got a career high 31 games. This is in 2016, 2017, by the way. A career high 2 goals, a career high 9 assists, a career high 11 points, tied for the second best plus minus of his career at +3. He averaged 15 minutes and 49 seconds of ice time, 27 block shots, a career high 22 hits, and 7 takeaways against 20 giveaways. And as far as his career numbers, 90 games, again, 4 goals, 20 assists, and is a +11. He, to me, seems like at best he's just going to be organizational depth for the Rangers. It's also possible he's not even with them after training camp and the preseason. He is on a PTO. You just look at the Ranger defensemen right now and the 5 guys are going to be out there, and the guys we talked about earlier today, Jones, Gustafsson, and Harper. That's 8 guys right there that are ahead of Clendenin in the pecking order. You've got probably Ty Emberson. You could throw him in there. That's 9. Matthew Robertson is 10. I just don't see a path to playing time on the New York Rangers for Adam Clendenin. Never say never, because I probably would have said the exact same thing about Ben Harper last year, and then he ended up carving out a little bit of a role for himself. But yeah, to me, it's one of those things. They're going to see if they can unlock something. Veteran journeyman defenseman. We'll see how it all goes. But obviously, I would expect Clendenin to be competing really hard throughout the preseason. Hopefully, they at least give him a chance. Hopefully, he's out there for most of the 6 preseason games, and they at least let him shoot his shot, as the kids would say. But I figure we can pretty much call it there. Hey, guys, guess what? In our next episode, we are going to be talking about a New York Ranger hockey game. Not even like a rookie game or anything along those lines. No, the New York Rangers are going to be playing hockey against the Boston Bruins. That happens on Sunday at 5 p.m. Cannot wait to watch that. Cannot wait to come back here and discuss everything that happened with all of you as well. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.